From WisPolitics in Madison, you're listening to Capital Chats.
This is Capital Chats, brought to you by Spectrum. I'm Joshua Irvin, a reporter for WisPolitics. Earlier this month, we brought you an interview with De Pere School Board member Randy Tollefson, who is running to unseat incumbent GOP Representative Ben Franklin. This week, I spoke to Representative Franklin. We discussed school funding, bipartisanship, and how he hopes to persuade voters to grant him a second term. Representative Franklin, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
So, you're a freshman lawmaker making the case to voters to give you a second term. What are you pointing to when De Pere voters ask, "What have you done for me?"
Yeah, great question. So we've been very active in our first session. We've been on 6 different committees, which isn't just a lot for a freshman lawmaker, but that's a lot for any lawmaker with any level of experience. But we wanted to be on all these committees because there were things in each of them that were important to our community. That as I went and knocked at doors the first go round, that I wanted to have a seat at the table. I wanted to hear the arguments and hearings, and I wanted to help create legislation that was meaningful, impactful legislation on behalf of the constituents that I represent. And so I think we've done a very good job of that. And one of the other things that I heard resounding over and over again as I knocked doors for the first time was, can you all just work together? Referring to Republicans and Democrats, right? And I heard that loud and clear so many times, and we really tried to embody that in how we govern. And as a result, I'm very proud that we were able to get 10 different bills signed into law, me as a Republican with a Democratic governor. And those 10 bills were all voted on a bipartisan basis, had bipartisan support, and then also a couple of those were unanimous. We did a lot of work for veterans. We did a lot of work for families, for our youth, and different things that impact our community, not just here in Northeast Wisconsin, but also impact the whole state.
All right. Now, your opponent is a De Pere school board member who is running in part on increasing school funding. It is no secret that state funding has not kept pace with inflation for some time. How do you plan to respond to criticisms that Republicans haven't done enough to fund schools over the last decade?
Well, actually, I agree with that to a degree. One of the things that a lot of people don't know about me, I had an opportunity to tell a lot of this to a lot of people at doors, is I am not against the K-12 education system at all. I'm a product of the K-12 education system. In fact, when I graduated high school, I started going to college initially to be a school teacher. I wanted to be a music teacher and I wanted to be a basketball coach because those people had such an impact and influence on my life in a positive way that helped teach me and coach me, that I wanted to, it was a way that I looked at giving back. And if I can do something that I love, giving back and make money doing it, so I wanted to be a school teacher. So I feel for number one for our school teachers. We have a retention problem in our state for retaining school teachers. I think that we need to really look at that. One of the very first bills that I authored out of when I got sworn in was Assembly Bill 6. I believe it was Assembly Bill 6. But that talked about addressing the issue where we were seeing administrators giving themselves really big pay raises, but teachers weren't getting the same proportionate pay raise. So that bill would have leveled that out to where it looked out for our teachers, making sure they were getting appropriate pay raises as well. But also the bill, you know, really would have just added a layer of accountability to make sure that one of the things that we're hearing about is there's some concern around our community about the outcomes that we're getting. So making sure that we're working with DPI and how we can keep moving the state forward. We have great school systems here. De Pere is really good. West De Pere is good. Green Bay area school I mean, all of them are good. They're doing great things. And we're one of the few communities around the state where we get people moving to our area just to put their kids in our schools. And so that's a great place for us to be in. But but I agree. The 42% that we did in the biennial budget at the beginning, um, we need to follow through on that. We need to find ways to get that done. Those schools count on those funds. Um, and that's the least that we can do. And I also think when you're looking at what we just try to do with the state surplus, we tried to give more money to the schools, 300 million to special ed, 300 to general aid. But that is not a silver bullet by any means. But that would have made a definite impact. I met with all three of my state superintendents really just within the last couple of weeks. I met with them again. I have a good relationship with all of them, and you know, I am advocating. I sent a letter to the governor with other Republican lawmakers, urging the governor to call us back into special session so that we can get that extra money out the door.
Gotcha. Your opponent on this podcast had suggested returning to fund just the special education portion of that surplus spending deal. Is that something you would support? Do you want to come back with the same $1.8 billion deal? What do you think should happen if the legislature were to reconvene in a second special session?
That's a great question. I appreciate you asking that. I think the important thing is just give the listeners a little peek behind the curtain. There were negotiations going on for literally a couple months on this between leadership and the Assembly, the Senate, and the governor's office. And just whenever you have negotiations going on, there's a give and a take. There are certain things that the governor's office wanted. There are certain things that our leadership wanted within the legislature. And so, unfortunately, that's not really the way the government works. Like you don't really, in this particular instance anyway, you take some wins. There's some things you don't really love about it. For example, I don't particularly love the technical college provision that was in the state, but the state surplus. So I think that we need to go back and look at that, make some revisions there. But I was a yes vote on it. Again, it wasn't a silver bullet, but it appropriated $600 million specifically to our schools, 300 special ed, 300 general aid. It would give rebate checks to people in a tight economy right now. Those rebate checks would have certainly helped. It would have helped bite on property tax, which is a big issue in our area as well. I mean, people weren't happy when they opened their property taxes this past December. Some of that's because of the 400-year veto, some of that's because referendums. People can point the fingers all they want, but the reality is we're in this situation. We had an opportunity to give real money, real relief to people, and unfortunately, it died in the Senate and didn't get there. But we had full confidence as the bill was drafted, when it passed and gets to the governor, he was committed to signing it. So I would be in support of going back for that.
Gotcha. With, I say, sounds like pretty much all the kind of major provisions of that bill intact.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Talking about both the surplus spending bill and your comments earlier, about trying to pass bipartisan legislation. That has been a bit of a problem in recent years. Um, there was a different situation where earlier this year where two veterans housing and recovery program sites in Chippewa Falls and Green Bay closed. Republicans and Democrats had introduced competing bills to fund these programs. You were party, I believe, to the GOP bill, and neither went anywhere. My question to you is, how can the legislature be better at working across party lines?
Great question as well, and I think we need more of this. And the one thing that I'll say that I would really like viewers or listeners to know is it has been challenging, but I feel like we've done a really good job of this out of my office. We had 10 bills signed into law this session out of our office alone that we drafted. And again, that doesn't happen by accident. That's a lot of hard work. That's putting the effort. That's working across the aisle. That's working with stakeholders and making sure we get the drafting process right to where we get bipartisan support, to where we get, I've always told people a good bill is a good bill. I've been on record saying that, and I will continue to say that. I don't care who authors or drafts the bill. There's been some Democratic bills that I've supported as well. I've worked with some local representatives, Ahmad Rivera, and on some bills that he has for housing and things like that. And that's how we need to govern. Is we need to, once we're elected, we are representing the people, and we're just not going to be able to move forward, at least not as effectively as we can, if we don't do that. So I think the 10 bills signed on a bipartisan fashion that we authored out of my office are huge. In reference to what you're asking about, like the veterans, so there are 4 bills directly out of my office that were specifically geared toward veterans and currently serving Guard and Reserve members. 2 of those bills had to do with the homeless veterans that you referenced recently. And what I think we got here was actually a better product than what the state had before. Because what the state had before, we had 3 homeless shelters around the entire state. One of those was right here in Bellevue, right outside of Green Bay. And those 2 of those were closed down by the governor because there wasn't $1.9 million appropriated in the state budget for that. But what the bills did that I authored with Senator Wimberger on the Senate side, it appropriated the 1.9 million that was initially asked for a program to expand it to a statewide program instead of 3 specific facilities. And this makes a lot of sense for our state because if you think about somebody who's truly in a homeless situation, they likely do not have the resources to travel, several hours to get to one of these facilities. So now the money is appropriated to where anybody in the state that has a non-government organization and not-for-profit that is providing services for our homeless veterans can now receive the same funds that those 3 facilities would have received. We're not closing down any additional facilities. We're keeping the one open. But this bill is huge. It's huge for our veteran community. We had a ton of support from the veteran community. We had people come testify in support of it from the veteran community. So I really feel like it has actually ended up really good for the state.
Thank you. But turning back to the question of, bipartisanship, you had these 10 bills. How do you bring that ethos to the broader legislature? Does it mean co-authoring bills with Democrats, assuming the GOP has the majority? Does it mean seeing to it that Democratic authored bills get hearings in the assembly? What is the approach you'd bring to boost bipartisanship outside of your office?
Honestly, I think you just hit it right on the head. I think everything you just said is the right approach. And that is the approach that we have tried to do. I did not chair a committee. I was a vice chair of the military Veterans and Military Affairs Committee down at the Capitol. So I don't have a say of what gets a hearing and what doesn't at my level. You have to chair a committee for that. But what you just said is the right attitude. I value all opinions. We do not need to agree on everything. There are foundational differences between Democrats and Republicans, but what doesn't make the news is we agree on an awful lot of things. We agree on probably 80 to 90% of things. It's the other stuff that makes the headlines and the news. And so I think if people just step back and they look at it from that lens, uh, it just makes sense to work together.
Okay. Representative, thank you very much.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you again to Representative Franklin, to Spectrum, and to you, the listener. For WisPolitics, I'm Joshua Irvin, and this has been Capital Chats.